everybody, welcome back for another video. So today I'm going to talk all about what I may or may not be reading in the month of May. So a lot of my booktube friends are doing what they are calling Mood Read May. And I think this is an amazing idea. You should check out a couple of their videos. I think Tori's doing Mood Read May, Theo's doing Mood Read May. I will link their videos because I'm loving this idea. Now, to be fair, I kind of always mood read. Yes, I make these TBR videos. Having a little bit of some structure to follow kind of helps me. But we all know I cannot do too much structure. That does not work. But I like making these videos. I like making the plans, like thinking ahead and having things to look forward to is part of the fun for me. But I've never been one to stick so rigidly to a TBR, like it controls me. For the most part, I kind of follow my outline, but if something sounds good, or if I get FOMO because a bunch of other people are reading something, or if I'm just not in the mood for what I have planned, I'm always kind of mood reading. You know what I mean? But for May, for me, here's what I'm thinking. I have been reading a ton of fantasy in 2023. Like, I've had a super good reading year, but there has been a little bit of structure. I've done 2 readathons, and they've both been so fun, and they've gone so well. And surprisingly, they haven't really changed or affected my reading plans that much. Luckily, the rules and the guidelines have been flexible enough and kind of broad enough that I've been able to kind of stick with what I was already hoping to read. So, love the readathons, but they have had me reading more fantasy than maybe I normally would. Now, fantasy is my primary genre, but I do like to weave in some, random stuff as my moods hit. And then also, the beginning of the year also usually gets a lot of excitement going for starting new things. And so I had started a couple of rereads. I had started a couple of read-alongs. And again, they've all been great. But it kind of locks you into that, well, I'm going to read one book this month and the next book the next month. And a lot of that stuff is kind of wrapping up for me. And so for the month of May, my plan is to mood read, but also, if you remember, I made a video at the beginning of the year, or right before the beginning of the year, talking about the 17 standalones that I'm making it a goal to read them all in 2023, no matter what. And so I thought May would be a really good month to catch up on some of those so that I'm not at the end of the year just like freaking out because this list is like looming over my shoulder. So I have a couple things planned that I definitely want to get to, and then the rest of it's kind of a maybe. Maybe I'll read this. Maybe I'll read something else. So first of all, let's talk about a couple of books that I'm pretty much 100% going to read. And the first one is going to be Dark Age by Pierce Brown. This is one of my buddy read-along books that I have going. I've read one book a month since January, and this will have me all caught up and just waiting for Lightbringer in July. And I will say my reread of the first 3 was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed Iron Gold last month, and it was my first time reading it. And I am currently, this is the 1st of May, and this is my first book I started. I started it today, and I'm about 20% in, and you guys, it is so dark. So this one is definitely getting read. Next up on the books I'm definitely going to read will be Of Darkness and Light, and that is book 2 of the Bound and Broken series by Ryan Cahill. I read book 1 just a few days ago at the end of April, and guys, I liked it so much. It definitely scratched that classic fantasy itch, but had plenty of things that modern fantasy readers are going to love and appreciate. I really, really liked it. So I'm definitely going to read book 2 this month, but I'll probably do it towards the end of the month. Another thing that I'm definitely going to at least start this month is The Return of the Griffin. And this is book 2 of The Hybrid Helix by J.C.M. Byrne. I read book 1, Wistful Ascending, in April. And I can't even tell you guys how much I loved it. I thought it was the epitome of fun, but it was still so well done and was unique and kept me captivated and interested. The audiobook on book 1 was so good. Book 2 doesn't have an audiobook yet, but I'm so sucked in by the story and I've got to get back with this character that I'm going to do this as my eyes only read for May. I have been trying to do one eyes only book a month because we all know I'm addicted to audiobooks, but I want to train myself and get better and back into the habit of reading eyes only. And so this one, because I'm so sucked in, I don't want to wait for the audiobook. I'm going to go ahead and start this one eyes only this month in May. Now, for the last couple of months, I have been saying that I have just been in the mood to read some Stephen King, but one reason or another, I just haven't been getting too much lately. So I have 2 books here that I already own that sound interesting to me, and I may read The Dark Half, and I may read Gerald's Game. The Dark Half, I don't know too much about it, but it seems to be one that's highly recommended by other Stephen King fans who have similar taste as I do. And then Gerald's Game, I've seen the movie and I really, really enjoyed it. Stephen King adaptations are not always a slam dunk, but I really liked this movie. So I would love to read the book to see how it compares. Also, it is a companion novel to Dolores Claiborne. I read that a couple months ago and I loved it. And having already seen the movie of this before I read Dolores Claiborne, I was able to kind of make the connections of how these 2 books tie together. And so I'm just really interested to read the book now because it just seems like a natural choice. All right, so here's a couple more either or maybe choices for myself. I mentioned that I've been reading a lot of fantasy lately, and I might be in the mood to just not have a very fantasy-heavy May. But I love fantasy, and it always calls to me. So I picked out a couple of books that are either standalones, or I've been told that they read well as a standalone, or at least there's only one book out for each of these. But anyway, they're both fantasy, and one is The Sword of Kaigen, and this is on my 17 standalones list. So this is very interesting to me because it would cross something off of my list, and I mean, I'm always in the mood and on the hunt for a really good fantasy standalone. The other option is The Goblin Emperor, and that is by Catherine Addison, and you guys have to check out this gorgeous book. This was sent to me by a viewer, The Poison Dwarf. You guys, he sends me the best book boxes, and he just surprised the crap out of me with this one. Look, it is so gorgeous. Thank you so much. But this has been on my radar since before I got it in the mail from him. But honestly, when you get a book this pretty, it just calls to you. And I have got to read this because I want to read from this beautiful, beautiful book. So I have actually the audiobook already of The Sword of Kaigen, and I have a library hold on this one. So it's going to be really hard for me not to read both. But I really want to kind of mix it up this month and work in some stuff that isn't up my normal wheelhouse. So we'll see. I may get to both of them, but I may only get to one. Let me show you a couple more that I have library holds coming up for both of them. I just don't know that I'm going to be able to do both of them. They're very, very different, so this will be where the mood reading really comes into play, because I think both audiobook holds are coming up available around the same time, so really it'll come down to mood for me. The first one is A Version by Alastair Reynolds, and this was a birthday gift from my friend Brent, and him and Crow and a couple other guys have just been really singing this book's praises. And it's interesting to me because I believe it's a standalone. It's sci-fi, which I'm always wanting to get a little more sci-fi in when the mood's right. And also, it's not very long. And I'm just kind of like, does that sound like the perfect book? Maybe. So I really am hoping to get to this one soon. That might mean the next couple months, but maybe it'll mean this month. And the other one that's competing for its slot is completely different, I believe. It is historical fiction. It is very famous. I feel like I'm one of the last people in the world to read it. And it is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. So this is an enormous book. So when this hold comes through from my library, it's kind of going to come down to what am I in the mood for? Do I want some standalone, fast-paced science fiction, or do I want a big, chunky, historical fiction modern classic from the sounds of it? So one way or the other, I'm going to get through both of these books this year for sure. But is it going to be May? I don't know, maybe. These next two check a couple more boxes from that 17 standalones list. And they're both also recommendations from my brother Ben. And he's constantly hounding me about these 2 books. Have you read Empire of the Summer Moon? Have you read All Quiet on the Western Front? No, I have not read either yet. But again, these came recommended highly to me by my brother Ben, and he has such great taste. And we don't always align, but when he recommends something to me, it's because he knows I'm going to like it. And from what I've heard of these books and their reputations, I do believe they will be slam dunks. But they're both very serious in nature. They're both based on true events. And I don't know if I'm going to be in the mood to read both of these in May, but I'm hoping one or the other will make the cut so I can have those conversations with him. That's part of what's so fun with me about reading and taking recommendations from my friends and my family and people who know me well, is so that I can turn around and have that conversation with them. So I definitely want to get to one of these, but getting to both of them would be great because that's 2 more boxes checked off of my standalone list. So far in 2023, I've been averaging about 7 to 9 books a month. So I already know that there's no way I'm going to read all of these books this month, but that's okay with me because this is the month of maybe, so anything could happen. So I grabbed 2 more books that were not fantasy and definitely just kind of mixing things up out of my normal wheelhouse. Because if I keep going with this not in the mood for fantasy kind of thing, then I may not even touch the Goblin Emperor or Sword of Kaigen. So if that happens and I'm like, give me more variety, I have a couple more backups. These are also off of my standalone list. One is Beneath a Scarlet Sky, and one is The Godfather. These are both happening in 2023 no matter what. Even if I'm still reading at midnight on the last day of the year, I'm definitely going to have that whole list done. But why not check them off early? It's kind of fun to get ahead of schedule and then just like really feel like you have nothing looming over your shoulder. So I would love to get as much checked off of that list as possible this month. But I don't want to go so far away from my fantasy roots that I'm just, feeling like I'm checking boxes and nothing else. So that's why I'm loving this month, is because I have so many good options. I have fantasy things I'm definitely reading. I have fantasy things I might read. But I have a bunch of other stuff that is genuinely exciting to me that I've been wanting to read. And this might just be the month that I tackle a whole bunch of those. Now, I do have one more thing on the list of maybes, and this one isn't really up to me. This is up to Tim Gerard Reynolds, the narrator, I think. But last month, book 4 of a series that I really, really like dropped. And I got this book, I got the hardcover, they're ready to go, but the audiobook is not ready for me yet. Now, I am kind of tempted to just start reading it eyes only, but I love the audiobooks for this series, so I kind of want to wait, because if I start something with audio, I like to see it through in the same format. I know that kind of threw me off a little bit with 5 Warrior Angels, and so I'm already going to reread that when the audio comes out, and so I don't really want to take a chance at altering my experience with the story by changing up my medium. So with this book, I'm waiting for the audio. If it comes out this month, then I'll drop everything and I will read it because I like it that much that it's kind of a day 1 read for me. Well, day 1 listen. So as soon as that audiobook comes out, I'm reading it. But until then, it's just sitting on deck and it's ready for me to start at any time. So yeah, guys, that's all I have on my plans for May. I may be reading these books, or we may check back in at the end of the month, and it may look totally different because I'm just allowing myself so much freedom. It feels good to know that if I stay in a fantasy-centric mood, that there's plenty of options in there. I have like 4 or 5 fantasy books picked out that I can run with. But if I am really embracing this whole, like, take a break, just pick up something new, challenge yourself, go out of your wheelhouse, there is so much of that padding this maybe list as well. So please let me know, what do you have planned for May? Are you just going to fully mood read? Do you always just mood read? Do you have a plan? And are those plans important to you? Like, how do you feel? Because I kind of like how I typically do it, where I have an outline, and sometimes at the end of the month, that outline is exactly what I did. But sometimes I look back and I'm just like, I'm so glad I let my mood take control. So let me know, what are you maybe reading this month?